I spent $52,000 on concrete and steel just to watch her life fall apart. And honestly, it was worth every single red cent. She thought because she drove a white BMW X5 and ran the homeowners association for the new ticky-tacky subdivision next door, she owned my land. She was about to learn a hard lesson, the kind they don't teach in whatever business school she crawled out of. In Texas, the deed is king, and my family's name was on a deed that was older than the state's last constitution. My place, the Broken Spur Ranch, ain't much by modern standards. Just 50 acres of rolling pasture, a creek that runs most of the year, and a 2-story farmhouse my great-granddaddy built with his own 2 hands. It's been in the McCoy family since 1940. It's where I was born, where my father was born, and where I buried him next to my mother under the big oak tree that overlooks the south pasture. This land isn't just dirt and grass to me. It's bone deep. It's the smell of hay in the barn, the lowing of my Angus cattle at dawn, the feel of the sun on my neck as I mend a fence line. It's a quiet life, a hard life, but it's mine, and I don't take kindly to people trying to take what's mine. The trouble started quiet-like, a cloud of dust on the horizon that turned into bulldozers. They scraped 100 acres of pristine prairie flat and started throwing up these oversized beige houses so close together you could pass a cup of sugar from window to window. They called it Willow Creek Estates, which was a lie on 2 counts. The creek was on my property, and these weren't estates. They were glorified tract homes with granite countertops and no soul. But I'm a live and let live kind of man. Progress marches on, I told myself. As long as they stayed on their side of the fence, I'd stay on mine. The first time I met her, Cynthia Bradshaw, she was leaning against the hood of her sterile white BMW, which she'd parked square in the middle of my private gravel road. My road. The one that runs a half mile from the county blacktop to my farmhouse, cutting right through my property. The deed and the county survey map were crystal clear on that point. It was, and always had been, the private driveway for the Broken Spur Ranch. I was coming back from town in my old Ford F-250, rattling and covered in dust, and there she was, blocking the way, tapping on her phone like she was waiting for a valet. I pulled up, killed the engine, and gave it a minute. In this part of the country, you give folks a chance to realize their mistake. She didn't even look up. I finally got out, my boots crunching on the gravel I'd paid to have laid myself. "Afternoon, ma'am," I said, tipping my hat. "You seem to be a little lost." She finally looked up, her eyes scanning my dusty jeans, my worn-out shirt, and my calloused hands. She gave me a smile that was all teeth and no warmth. It was the kind of smile a predator gives before it bites. "Oh, I'm not lost at all," she said, her voice dripping with condescension. "I'm Cynthia Bradshaw, president of the Willow Creek Estates Homeowners Association. I'm just surveying the community access road." I felt a slow burn start in my gut, but I kept my voice even. "Ma'am, with all due respect, this isn't a community access road. This is my private driveway. The entrance to your development is a 1/4 mile back down the county road." She laughed, a short, sharp sound like breaking glass. "Oh, bless your heart. You must be mistaken. Our development plans clearly show this as a secondary access point and a recreational easement for our residents. It's for, jogging and nature walks." I took a slow breath, tasting the dust in the air. "Ma'am, I've got the deed and the survey from 1940 hanging on my wall. It shows my property line extending 50 feet on either side of this road. There's no easement, never has been." "Well," she said, waving a manicured hand dismissively, "I'm sure that's just some outdated paperwork. We'll have our lawyers sort it out. In the meantime, you'll need to make sure this road is kept clear for our residents." She pushed off her car, finally ready to leave. "It was lovely meeting you, Mr. McCoy," I said. "Hank McCoy. And this road will be kept clear, ma'am. Clear of trespassers." Her smile tightened. "We'll see about that." She got in her German-engineered box, turned it around in a cloud of my gravel, and sped off. I stood there for a long time, watching her dust settle. The peace and quiet of my ranch had just been shattered, and I knew, deep in my bones, that this was only the beginning. My wife, Sarah, a nurse with more patience in her little finger than I have in my whole body, told me to just ignore her. She's just a city woman with a superiority complex, she said that night. She'll get bored and move on to bothering someone else. But I knew better. I'd seen her eyes. That wasn't a woman who got bored. That was a woman who saw a nail and believed her sole purpose in life was to be the hammer. The next few weeks were a series of small escalations. I'd find tire tracks from her BMW or some other luxury SUV just inside my gate. I started locking it. The lock was a heavy-duty master lock, the kind you need bolt cutters for. A few days later, I found it lying in the grass, snipped clean through. A new set of tire tracks led 100 yards onto my property before turning around. I replaced the lock with a case-hardened chain and a puck lock that was supposedly impenetrable. I knew it was just a delay tactic. The real line was crossed about a month later. I was moving a small herd of my pregnant heifers from the north pasture to the south one, where the grass was richer. It's a slow process. You can't rush a pregnant cow, let alone a dozen of them. They were ambling across my gravel road, calm as you please, and when I heard it, the high-pitched whine of an engine moving way too fast. It was her white BMW, cresting the small rise like a bat out of hell. I stepped into the middle of the road, holding up my hand. A reasonable person would have slowed down, stopped even. Cynthia Bradshaw was not a reasonable person. She laid on the horn, a shrill European blast that cut through the peaceful afternoon. The cattle panicked. A pregnant animal was already on edge, and that god-awful noise sent them scattering. One of my best heifers, a prize-winning Angus named Daisy, who was just a few weeks from calving, went down hard on the gravel, her legs splaying out from under her. The rest of the herd stampeded, crashing through a section of barbed wire fence I just mended that morning. Cynthia slammed on her brakes, her car skidding to a stop inches from where I stood. The window slid down. "Move your filthy cows, you disgusting redneck trash," she screamed, her face a mask of purple rage. "This is a road, not a barnyard." Something inside me went cold. The slow burn turned to ice. I walked over to her window, my boots feeling heavy on the ground. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't need to. I spoke in a low, measured tone that was more dangerous than any shout. "You will turn this car around," I said, looking her dead in the eye. "You will go back to your plastic house, and you will never, ever set foot on my property again. This is your only warning." For a second, I think she saw something in my eyes that scared her, because she actually looked speechless, but it only lasted a second. "I'll be back with my lawyer. You can't threaten me. This is an HOA easement," she shrieked, but her voice had a tremor in it now. She threw the car in reverse, spun the tires, and tore back down the road, leaving me in a cloud of dust and the wreckage of my afternoon. My priority was Daisy. I got her calmed down and back on her feet. She was favoring her left foreleg, and there were some nasty scrapes on her side. The vet, old Doc Adams, came out and confirmed she had a sprain and was at risk of going into premature labor from the stress. He gave her a shot to calm her down and told me to keep a close eye on her. The rest of the herd was a mess, tangled in wire and spooked. It took me and Sarah until well after dark to round them all up and patch the fence. That night, sitting at the kitchen table, Sarah looked at my face. The calm patience was gone. "You're planning something," she said. It wasn't a question. "Good." That was all she needed to say. She knew me. She knew that the line had been crossed, and now there was no going back. Cynthia Bradshaw had declared war on my family, my land, and my livelihood. She just didn't realize I was the one who was going to finish it. The next phase of her assault was bureaucratic. She couldn't intimidate me in person, so she decided to use the government as her weapon. The first call came from the Environmental Protection Agency. A polite but firm young man on the phone informed me that an anonymous complaint had been filed against the Broken Spur Ranch. The complaint alleged I was allowing cattle waste to contaminate a public waterway, specifically Willow Creek. I almost laughed. Willow Creek ran through the center of my property, a good half-mile from her subdivision. The only way she could even know its name was from the sign on the county road. "Son," I said, keeping my voice calm, I'd be happy for you to come out and take a look. 2 things you should know. First, Willow Creek hasn't been a public waterway since my great-granddaddy bought this land. Second, my cattle watering area is on the opposite side of my property, and it's a closed-loop system with drainage fields that exceed every state and federal standard. I can show you the engineering plans. The inspector, a young fellow named Peterson, showed up 2 days later. He was professional, but you could tell he was expecting to find some backwoods polluter. I walked him through my entire operation. I showed him the solar-powered well, the filtration system, the terraced drainage fields that prevent any runoff from even reaching the creek. I showed him the water test I conduct myself every month. After an hour, he was shaking his head. "Mr. McCoy," he said, "this is one of the cleanest, most environmentally sound small ranching operations I've ever seen. I apologize for wasting your time. The complaint is baseless." I just nodded. I knew who filed it. He knew who filed it, but without proof. All he could do was close the case. A week later, it was the county health department. Another anonymous tip. This one claimed my ranch was a breeding ground for disease due to unsanitary conditions and improper disposal of animal carcasses. This one stung. I take immense pride in the health of my animals and the cleanliness of my land. The inspector was a stern-looking woman who looked like she'd been sucking on a lemon. She marched around my barn, my feed storage, and my pastures, clipboard in hand. She didn't find a thing out of place. My feed was in sealed containers, my barn was spotless, and the only animal carcass was the one in my freezer from the steer I'd had butchered last fall. "Where do you dispose of your dead animals?" she demanded. "Ma'am," I said, "I haven't lost an animal to sickness in over 5 years. When one does pass from old age, I have a contract with the rendering plant in the next county. They handle it according to state law. Would you like to see the service records?" She left in a huff, muttering about crank calls. I was 2 for 2. Cynthia was throwing everything she had at me, trying to find a chink in my armor. She was wasting my time and taxpayer money, but she wasn't landing a single blow. The problem was, I knew this wasn't the end of it. People like her don't just give up, they double down. The official-looking envelope arrived a few weeks after that. It was delivered by a process server, a skinny kid who looked nervous to even be on my porch. It was a lawsuit. Cynthia Bradshaw and the Willow Creek Estates HOA were suing me, Hank McCoy, for obstructing a public right-of-way and denying community access to a recorded easement. They were demanding I remove my gate and pay them damages for the inconvenience I'd caused. I read the papers, my hand steady. This was her big move, the legal threat. She thought she could bury me in paperwork and lawyer fees. She thought I was just some dumb rancher who'd get scared and roll over. She'd made a critical miscalculation. She assumed I was poor, and she assumed I was stupid. I wasn't a rich man, not by a long shot, but the McCoys have never been fools. And we've always kept a rainy day fund, money from selling a prize bull here and there over the years. A go-to-hell fund, my daddy used to call it. It was for moments just like this. I didn't call a lawyer. Not yet. First, I went to the source. The next morning, I was at the county clerk's office when they opened. It's a dusty old building downtown, filled with the smell of old paper and history. I knew the head clerk, a woman named Margaret from church. I told her what I needed. I need every deed, survey, plat map, and easement record associated with Parcel 7B, the old McCoy homestead, going back to the original land grant if you have to, I said. Margaret gave me a knowing look. "Having trouble with those new folks out at Willow Creek?" she asked. I just nodded. She led me to a back room filled with enormous leather-bound books. "It's all in here, Hank. Good luck." I spent the next 3 days in that room. I went through records from the 1980s, the 1960s, all the way back to the original survey from 1940, when my great-grandfather bought the land from a failed cotton farmer. My fingers were stained with ink and dust. My eyes burned from reading the cramped, elegant cursive of surveyors long dead. I found it on the second day. The original plat map, drawn on linen, brittle with age. It showed my property, the 50 acres, clear as day, and it showed the road. It was labeled in precise, unambiguous letters, private driveway to McCoy residence. There was no mention of an easement, no right-of-way, nothing. I found the corresponding deed, which explicitly stated that the owner of the property had sole and exclusive use of the driveway. I paid for certified copies of everything. The paper trail was ironclad. Her entire lawsuit was built on a foundation of lies. But I still didn't understand her motive. Why fight so hard for something she had to know she couldn't win? The answer came from an unexpected source. Eddie, the mailman. Eddie's been delivering mail in this county for 30 years. He knows everyone and everything. He pulled up to my mailbox one afternoon while I was out mending the fence that Daisy and the herd had busted. He leaned out the window of his little white truck. "Hank, I probably shouldn't be telling you this," he started, looking around nervously, "but I see the mail. I see what goes in and out of that Willow Creek sales office, and I hear things." What kind of things, Eddie?" I asked, leaning on my fence post. "That Bradshaw woman," he said, lowering his voice. "She's in deep. Heard she went through a nasty divorce, lost a bundle. She's the developer and the realtor for that whole subdivision. She's leveraged up to her eyeballs. If she doesn't sell those houses and sell them fast, she's going bankrupt." He then reached into a bag and pulled out a glossy, folded brochure. "This is what she's giving to potential buyers." He handed it to me. I unfolded it. It was full of pictures of the beige houses, smiling families, and text full of corporate buzzwords like luxury living and curated lifestyle. And then I saw it. Under a section titled Exclusive Community Amenities, right next to resort-style pool and clubhouse, was a picture of two people in brand new hiking gear, smiling as they walked down a tree-lined gravel road. My road. The caption read, "Enjoy private access to miles of scenic nature trails through the historic Riverside Ranch." She didn't even get the name of my ranch right. That's when it all clicked into place. The whole puzzle. She wasn't just trespassing. She wasn't just being a nuisance. She was committing fraud. She was selling houses by promising access to my land. An amenity she had absolutely no right to offer. Her entire business model, the thing that stood between her and financial ruin, was dependent on stealing my property. Her lawsuit wasn't an attack. It was a desperate Hail Mary pass to try and legally seize the asset she'd already sold. That's when I knew I had her. She hadn't just picked a fight. She'd handed me the gun, the bullets, and pointed out the target on her own chest. I walked back to the house, the brochure in my hand, and a cold, calm certainty settled over me. Sarah was on the porch. She saw the look on my face, the hard set of my jaw. "You found something," she said. "I found everything," I replied, handing her the brochure. She read it, her eyes widening. She looked from the glossy paper to my face. "What are you going to do?" she asked. A slow smile spread across my face. It probably wasn't a pleasant sight. "I'm going to build a wall," I said. Before I picked up the phone to call my lawyer, I had to make one other call. I called a man named Big Mike. Big Mike runs the largest concrete and construction outfit in 3 counties. He's a mountain of a man with a grip that could crush a coconut and a deep-seated hatred for entitled people and bureaucratic nonsense. He'd done some work for me before, pouring a new foundation for the barn, and his work was solid as the bedrock it sat on. I told him what I wanted. "Mike, I need a wall. I need it on the east property line, the full quarter-mile that borders that new subdivision. I want it 12 feet high, a foot thick, and reinforced with half-inch rebar. I want footings so deep you could park a truck on them. I want it to be what the military would call an agricultural security barrier." There was a pause on the other end of the line, then a low chuckle. "Hank, that ain't a wall. That's a fortress. What are you trying to keep out, a tank?" "Something like that," I said. "Can you do it? For you?" "Hell yeah, I can do it. It's going to be expensive, though." "You're talking serious yardage of concrete, a whole lot of steel, and a big crew." "Give me a number," I said. He did some figuring. The sound of a pencil scratching on paper coming through the phone. "Ballpark? You're looking at around 50 grand, maybe a little more." "When can you start?" I asked, not flinching at the price. This was what the Go to Hell fund was for. "Got to get the permits from the county first," he said. "But that's just a formality for an agricultural barrier on private land. They can't really say no. I can have the surveyors out there tomorrow to stake the line. We could be pouring concrete by the end of next week. There's one more thing, Mike, I said. I need it done on a specific weekend. I told him about Cynthia's grand opening event for Willow Creek Estates, which I knew was happening in 2 weeks thanks to a giant banner she'd hung at the entrance. I want your trucks rolling at dawn that Friday. I want that wall finished or as close to finished as humanly possible by Sunday afternoon. Big Mike let out a loud laugh. Oh, I see what you're doing. You're a mean son of a bitch, Hank McCoy. I love it. Consider it done. We'll run 2 crews, work through the night if we have to. It'll cost you a little extra for the overtime, but I'll throw in the satisfaction for free. That's a deal, I said. Send me the bill. The final quote came in at $52,000. I went to the bank the next day and got a cashier's check from the cattle fund. With the wall in motion, I finally called my lawyer, a sharp old fella named Ben Carter who'd handled my father's estate. I laid everything out for him, the trespassing, the harassment, the phony complaints, the lawsuit she'd filed, and the certified copies of my deeds and surveys. Then I showed him the sales brochure. Ben leaned back in his leather chair, a slow grin spreading across his face. Hank, he said, this is what we in the legal profession call a slam dunk. Her lawsuit is frivolous and we'll have it dismissed with prejudice. But this, he said, tapping the brochure, this is wire fraud, mail fraud, and deceptive trade practices. She's not just going to lose her lawsuit, she's going to lose her real estate license and quite possibly her freedom. He filed the countersuit the next day, along with a motion to dismiss her case. We also filed for a temporary restraining order, citing her repeated trespassing and the incident with the cattle. The judge, an old rancher himself, granted it immediately. Cynthia Bradshaw was now legally forbidden from setting foot on my property. The trap was set. All the pieces were in place. All I had to do was wait for her to walk into it. The Friday of her grand opening weekend dawned clear and cool. The sun was just peeking over the horizon when I heard them. The low, deep rumble of heavy machinery. I stood on my porch with a cup of coffee and watched as a convoy of Big Mike's trucks, dump trucks, a backhoe, and 2 massive concrete mixers, turned off the county road and rolled up my private driveway. They were followed by a flatbed carrying stacks of steel rebar and wooden forms. Big Mike himself was in the lead truck, and he gave me a wave as he passed. The construction had begun. It didn't take long for the beast to awaken. Around 7:30 a.m., I saw her white BMW come flying down the road from her subdivision. She skidded to a halt near the property line where Mike's crew was already using the backhoe to dig a deep trench for the footings. She jumped out of her car, dressed in some kind of designer business suit that was completely out of place in the dusty morning air. "What is the meaning of this?" she shrieked, her voice carrying across the pasture. "What are you doing? You can't do this." Big Mike, who was directing the backhoe operator, turned around slowly. He spat a stream of tobacco juice into the dirt. "Ma'am, I'm building a wall," he said, his voice a low rumble, "on Mr. McCoy's property, with a valid county permit. Now, I'd appreciate it if you'd step back. This is an active construction zone. A permit? You can't have a permit. I am the president of the HOA. I would have to approve this." "This ain't part of your HOA, darling," Mike said with a grin. "And the only approval I need is from the county and the man who's paying the bill. Now back up." She started screaming then, a string of incoherent rage about lawsuits and easements and how she was going to have all of us arrested. She pulled out her phone, and I could hear her screeching at some poor 911 dispatcher. Sure enough, 20 minutes later, 2 sheriff's deputies rolled up. Deputy Miller, a man I've known since he was in diapers, got out of the car. He took one look at the scene, the construction crew working, Cynthia waving her arms like a madwoman, and me leaning against my fence post sipping coffee, and sighed. "What's the problem here, Cynthia?" he asked, his voice already weary. "He's illegally blocking the community road," she yelled, pointing a trembling finger at the trench. "He's destroying HOA property. I want him and his whole crew arrested for trespassing and vandalism." I walked over and handed Deputy Miller a folder. It contained a copy of my property survey, the county permit for the wall, and the restraining order against Cynthia. He read through them carefully, his expression never changing. He handed the folder back to me. Then he turned to Cynthia. "Ma'am, According to this official county permit, Mr. McCoy is well within his rights to build this structure. It's on his property. And according to this restraining order, you are in violation of a court order by being here and harassing him. I'm going to have to ask you to return to your vehicle and leave the immediate vicinity. Her face went from red to a pasty white. Violation? He's the one violating my rights. I'll call my lawyer. I'll call the media. You can call whoever you like, Miller said, his patience clearly gone. But if you don't get back in your car right now, I'm going to arrest you for violating a restraining order. Is that clear? Defeated for the moment, she stalked back to her BMW, slammed the door, and sped away. The crew went back to work. By noon, the trench was dug, the rebar cages were being set in place, and the first concrete truck was backing up to the forms. The foundation of my wall was being poured. Phase 1 was complete. All day Saturday, the work continued. A second crew came on in the afternoon and worked under generator-powered lights late into the night. The wooden forms for the wall itself rose from the foundation, a towering skeleton of pine and steel. Cynthia made several more appearances, mostly just parking her car at the edge of her property and glaring, her phone pressed to her ear. I imagine she was having some very unpleasant conversations with her lawyer, who had undoubtedly received a copy of our countersuit by now. The first of her potential buyers started to arrive for the grand opening, slowing down to stare at the massive construction project next door. I saw a few of them pointing and talking to her, their expressions a mixture of confusion and concern. The main event happened Sunday morning. It was the final day of her big weekend, the day she was supposed to be signing contracts and popping champagne. Big Mike's crew had finished the final pour of concrete late Saturday night. The forms were still on, but the wall was there, a solid, 12-foot-high, quarter-mile-long monument to my property rights. The only thing left was the gate. At the spot where my gravel road met the property line, they had left a 20-foot gap. Now, 2 of Mike's men were welding a massive, custom-built steel gate into place. It was made of thick, reinforced steel bars, with a cross-bracing pattern that made it look like something you'd find at a military base. I was standing by the new gate talking to Mike, when I heard that familiar engine noise again. But this time it was different. It wasn't just fast. It was the sound of pure, unadulterated rage. Her white BMW came flying over the rise, not on her side of the line, but on my road. She must have snuck in through the county road entrance. She was doing at least 60. A plume of dust billowing behind her. "Hank, get back!" Mike yelled, shoving me behind one of the thick concrete gate posts. Cynthia wasn't slowing down. Her face was a twisted mask, visible even through the windshield. I think in her rage-addled mind, she saw the new gate as the final insult, the last barrier to her fraudulent success, and she was going to smash right through it. She was betting on the strength of German engineering against American steel. It was a bad bet. She hit the gate head-on. The sound was like a bomb going off, a deafening crunch of metal and a sickening thud as thousands of pounds of moving vehicle met an immovable object. The gate, which wasn't even fully set yet, shuddered. One of the welds groaned in protest, but it held. It didn't even bend. The BMW was not so lucky. The entire front end of the car accordioned, crumpling like a tin can. The hood buckled upwards. The engine was shoved back into the firewall, and both front tires blew out with a percussive bang. The airbags deployed, filling the cabin with white powder. A cloud of steam and the smell of hot antifreeze filled the air. The car was totaled, utterly and completely destroyed. For a moment, there was just silence, broken only by the hissing of the ruined radiator. Then, the driver's side door was shoved open and Cynthia Bradshaw stumbled out, coughing from the airbag dust. She had a cut on her forehead and a wild, unhinged look in her eyes. She looked at the gate, still standing. She looked at her mangled car, and then she looked at me. She opened her mouth and let out a scream. It wasn't a scream of anger or frustration. It was a raw, primal scream of utter defeat. The sound of a person whose entire world had just collapsed in a pile of twisted metal and shattered dreams. She had destroyed her own vehicle trying to breach the barrier. It was a perfect, almost poetic end to her campaign of harassment. Deputy Miller arrived a few minutes later, having been called by one of Mike's crew. This time, he didn't give her a warning. He put her in handcuffs for reckless endangerment and destruction of private property. My gate had a nice new dent in it, and put her in the back of his cruiser. As they drove away, I looked at Big Mike. He spat out his tobacco and kicked one of the BMW's flat tires. "Well," he said with a grin, "even a tank ain't getting through this." He was right. My wall was complete. But the war wasn't over. The final battle was yet to be fought. The next few days were quiet. Eerily so. Cynthia was out on bail, but with her car gone and the restraining order still in effect, the ranch was finally peaceful. The wall stood stark and imposing, a gray line drawn in the sand. It wasn't pretty, but it was effective. My cattle grazed peacefully, undisturbed by traffic or blaring horns. The physical barrier was sealed, but I knew the legal and financial battle was about to come to a head. My lawyer, Ben, called me on Wednesday. "She's getting desperate, Hank," he said. "She's called an emergency homeowners meeting for this Saturday at the town hall. Apparently she's going to explain the temporary access issue and try to rally the residents to fund her lawsuit against you." "Let her," I said. "I'll be there." "Oh, I know you will," Ben said. "And we're going to be prepared. I've already spoken to the Real Estate Commission. They're opening a formal investigation based on the evidence we sent them. I also took the liberty of reaching out to a few of the people who bought houses from her. Showed them your deed and her brochure. They are, to put it mildly, not happy. I think a few of them might be at that meeting too. But I had one more call to make. I called a reporter at the local news station, a young woman named Brenda, who had done a story on our prize-winning bulls a few years back. "Brenda," I said, "I think I have a story for you. It's about real estate fraud, a multi-million-dollar development, and a $50,000 wall. It's all coming to a head at the town hall on Saturday. You might want to bring a camera." Saturday arrived, a bright, sunny Texas afternoon. The town hall meeting room was packed. I saw at least 20 of the new homeowners from Willow Creek Estates. They were all well-dressed, anxious-looking people who had sunk their life savings into Cynthia's beige paradise. Cynthia herself stood at a podium at the front of the room looking haggard but defiant. She was wearing another power suit, but it couldn't hide the dark circles under her eyes or the faint bandage on her forehead. In the back of the room, Brenda the reporter and her cameraman were setting up. The red light on the camera already blinking, Cynthia started her speech, her voice high and strained. She painted a picture of a peaceful community being held hostage by a greedy, uncooperative redneck rancher. She talked about the historic community easement that I was illegally blocking. She claimed I was trying to extort money from the HOA. She was lying through her teeth, but she was a slick talker, and some of the homeowners were nodding along. "He is trying to isolate us," she declared, her voice rising with fake passion. "He is denying us the amenities we were promised, the lifestyle we paid for. But we will not be bullied. With your support, we will continue our lawsuit, and we will win. We will tear down his illegal wall and reclaim our road." She finished to scattered, uncertain applause. Then, before she could take any questions, I stood up from my seat in the front row. I had a heavy briefcase in my hand. "Ma'am," I said, my voice calm and steady, cutting through the murmurs in the room, "you've said a lot of things. Now I'd like to present some facts." I walked to the front of the room. Cynthia's face paled when she saw me. I opened my briefcase and took out several stacks of paper. I handed one stack to the couple sitting in the front row. "Pass these back," I said. The papers started circulating through the crowd. Eyebrows went up. People started whispering, their whispers growing louder and angrier. What I had handed out were 3 documents. The first was a crystal clear copy of the 1940 survey map, showing my road clearly labeled private driveway. The second was a copy of her own sales brochure, with the fraudulent amenity circled in red. The third was a copy of the restraining order I had against her. I turned to face the homeowners. "My name is Hank McCoy," I said. "My family has owned the land next to you for over 80 years. The road Ms. Bradshaw is telling you is yours has never been anything but our private driveway. There is no easement, there never has been." She knew this, but she sold you these homes based on a lie. A man in the third row jumped to his feet. Is this true? He shouted at Cynthia. Did you sell us access you didn't own? Chaos erupted. Everyone started talking at once, yelling at Cynthia, who just stood there speechless, a deer in the headlights. The news camera was rolling, capturing every moment. I held up my hand for quiet. She wasn't just lying to you. I continued, my voice ringing with authority. She was using your money to fund a frivolous lawsuit to try and steal my land. When that didn't work, she filed false complaints against my ranch with the EPA and the health department. When that didn't work, she destroyed my property and endangered my livestock. And when I built a legal wall on my own land to protect my family, she tried to ram it with her car. The room was silent now, a thick, angry silence. The homeowners were staring at Cynthia with looks of pure betrayal. Her carefully constructed world of lies had been publicly dismantled in less than 5 minutes. And that's when the doors at the back of the room opened. 2 uniformed police officers walked in, followed by a plainclothes detective. They walked straight to the podium. Cynthia Bradshaw, the detective said, his voice calm but firm, you're under arrest for fraud, deceptive trade practices, and perjury in a civil filing. The handcuffs clicked shut around her wrists. The camera flash popped, freezing the look of utter shock and ruin on her face. And I just stood there, leaning against the podium, my arms crossed, watching the whole thing unfold. I didn't smile. I didn't have to. The look on her face was satisfaction enough. The aftermath was swift and total. With the camera rolling, her arrest was the lead story on the 10 o'clock news. The public exposure was absolute. The homeowners, armed with the evidence I'd provided, filed a class action lawsuit against her and her development company. Faced with overwhelming evidence of fraud, her company declared bankruptcy within a month. The banks foreclosed on the unsold houses. Cynthia, facing a mountain of legal bills and multiple criminal charges, took a plea deal. She got 18 months in a state penitentiary and was ordered to pay restitution, though I doubt any of those homeowners ever saw a dime. She lost her real estate license for life. Her reign of terror was over. The Willow Creek Estates development went into limbo for about a year. Eventually, it was bought by a more reputable builder who was upfront with the residents. The HOA was reformed, and the new president was a retired school teacher who brought me a homemade apple pie as a peace offering. We had a nice chat over the fence. I told him as long as they stayed on their side, I'd stay on mine. We haven't had a problem since. My life went back to normal, or as normal as it could be. The wall is still there. It's weathered now. The gray concrete stained by rain and time. Vines have started to creep up its sides. Some folks might call it ugly, but to me it's beautiful. It's a $52,000 monument to peace and quiet. It's a reminder that a man's land is his own, and some things are worth fighting for, no matter the cost. My prize heifer, Daisy, gave birth to a healthy bull calf a few weeks after the incident. I named him Justice. Every now and then, when I'm out mending a fence or checking on the herd, I'll look at that wall and think about Cynthia Bradshaw. I don't feel anger anymore or even pity. I just feel a quiet sense of satisfaction. She came into my life like a storm, all noise and fury, trying to tear down everything my family had built. But in the end, her storm broke against a wall of concrete and a foundation of truth. And my ranch, the broken spur, endured. The quiet returned. The cattle are safe. And the deed, as always, remains king. They say good fences make good neighbors, but sometimes you need a 12-foot concrete wall to make a felon. If you enjoyed this pro-revenge, hit like and subscribe. Share this with anyone dealing with an HOA tyrant.